Now, from Hawthorne, California, to entertain you tonight with a gala concert and a recording session, the fabulous Beach Boys! Welcome back, Beach Boys fans. You know, there's an album that we've talked about an awful lot on this channel in passing or in reference to other things, but we've never given it its own spotlight video. And I thought, you know what, August 1st, 60 years since the Beach Boys recorded their very famous concerts at Sacramento Memorial Auditorium. So I thought, you know what, to celebrate the 60th anniversary of those concerts, it's time we actually talk Beach Boys concert. It finally gets a starring video to itself. Before we begin, super special thanks to my good friend and occasional collaborator Steve Lewis of the Beach Boys Basement. His videos on 1964 pop culture and the Dance 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 single, which shares a video with this concert album, were of enormous help to me in putting all this together. So please check out his channel if you haven't done so already. Thanks, Steve, for all your info. It made my job a lot easier today. So let's talk a little bit about concert first. Concert, of course, was the Beach Boys' first chart-topping LP, the first one to go all the way to #1. It was also the first live album ever by any artist to go to #1. But despite the popularity at its time, you know, it was the first and for several years really the only Beach Boys live document readily available. But today, concert isn't really held in all that high regard. It's kind of been supplanted by some of their later efforts, notably 1973's Beach Boys in Concert. And you could even argue that it's obsolete as we have a digital set, this will be next week's video, of the two August Sacramento concerts. Digital only release, sadly, but these are the complete shows with no studio doctoring and, you know, very little changes made, that sort of thing. So is concert really even worth discussing? I say, as a historical document, absolutely, because this is really the only LP that we have from this very early era of the group, and even by the time it was released, the group was already changing their image and their style. So pretty interesting stuff. Concert was released in October of 1964, just in time for kids to ask for it for the holidays, I'm sure. And of course, it's been made available in multiple ways, which we'll talk about later in the video, including both cassette and CD. We'll also talk about some of the outtakes that are available on other releases before they were all compiled on the digital set. We'll do that a little bit later. Now, concert is actually comprised of several different shows. Not as many as some of the other albums, such as Beach Boys in Concert or the 50th Anniversary Tour album, but certainly a few. Many of the recordings come from a December 21st, 1963 show. We'll talk about which ones come from there. The album intro, which I quoted for you in the opening for this video, also comes from December 1963. And then the remainder were recorded at two separate shows on August the 1st, 1964. All three of these shows at the same venue, Sacramento Memorial Auditorium. And there's the digital set. We'll come back to that a little bit, just to kind of prep us for next week is all. We're not going to get too into that today. So, let's take a look at what is actually on this Beach Boys concert album, because this is unique. We see a lot of songs here that the Beach Boys didn't really do in studio, that we don't have regular studio takes for. Now, this is nothing new in the Beach Boys world. They've done many songs live that they never did in studio. Things like Duke of Earl always comes to my mind. That was a live staple for a long time. So it's certainly not unheard of for them to do it this way. But let's take a look. So we start off our record with Fred Vale's intro, which I mentioned is from the December concert there. And then we jump right into Fun, Fun, Fun. Now we kind of have to get this out of the way now. For many years, both Fun, Fun, Fun and I Get Around were said to be the original studio recordings with certain instruments mixed down or mixed out entirely and audience sounds added in. That was even on the Wikipedia page for a very long time, but I think that statement's been removed, if not totally redacted. I don't know if there's any evidence for that, but that being said, there's definitely studio sweetening on some of the songs. I'll talk about the one that really sticks out when we get there. But this recording of Fun, Fun, Fun doesn't sound anything like the 2014 digital releases do, which just use, again, the unedited, undoctored concert tape. So this is definitely kind of weird. It's also weird in general because we don't think of Fun, Fun, Fun as a song to begin a Beach Boys concert. It's usually the encore, the last or maybe second, third to last song in a Beach Boys set. Even today, if you go see Mike and Bruce, Fun, Fun, Fun will be last. If you see Al Jardine, probably last, maybe second to last. So very surprising to have it as the first thing. I should say, I guess, one reason why concert maybe isn't held in such high regard today is because it can be summed up in one word, and that's ah! Because there is so much screaming of obnoxious teenage fans, and the opening with Fun, Fun, Fun is certainly no exception to the rule. That's what I think makes it so hard to pinpoint where exactly this recording might have been from or how it was mixed. Because as soon as the Beach Boys get announced, if your volume's turned way up, I think you'll blow out your speakers with all the yelling of the fangirls. So, kind of odd. Fun, 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 again, doesn't sound like an authentic live Sacramento track. Kind of sounds sped up to me. And an odd choice for a starter, but the audience, they seem to be into it. Let's keep going now. We have The Little Old Lady from Pasadena, one of Jan and Dean's big hits there. Jan and Dean's version, I know it made the top 5, might even have reached number 1. I know it did in some parts of the world. The Beach Boys copied Jan and Dean's approach pretty closely on that. It doesn't really sound like either of the recordings on the Live in Sacramento digital set. This to me sounds like another one that could have been sweetened up or remixed, or perhaps had certain vocal or instrumental aspects done in studio. Because again, not quite the same sound. When it comes to Little Old Lady from Pasadena, it did indeed return to the live set. Here's the unofficial live album from the 80s, one of their 4th of July shows. And Little Old Lady from Pasadena is put in the car medley. You can see it paired up with 409 and Shutdown and others. The closest thing we have to a studio take by the Beach Boys is on the much maligned and very bizarre Beach Boys Salute NASCAR. This is Mike Love of the Beach Boys. Cool cars and hot fun at the beach have always been close to my heart. Dean Torrance was involved in this recording too, and it's fun to hear them do it in studio. I actually kind of like this version a little bit better than the one on the concert album, if I'm being honest. But interesting choice, and as it's not really a Beach Boys song, it is a cover, but it fits really well in their wheelhouse. I can see why kids would definitely have liked it. Kind of doctored up. Next up we have the Beach Boys car anthem, Little Deuce Coupe, which actually wouldn't be a live staple for much longer, despite being a big hit. Indeed, it wouldn't be very long before it was put into medleys. Remember, we talked about Beach Boys oldies medleys in my videos on releases like Graduation Day, things like that. But even as soon as late 1965, early 1966, Little Deuce Coupe was done partially here on Live in Japan. It's condensed in with Surfin' USA and Shutdown, just for a quickie medley. But it's nice to get an early Beach Boys recording with the whole group doing their parts, and they do something interesting, and there is film footage of them doing this too from one of their concert films from around the same time, of using Little Deuce Coupe as a means to introduce each member of the group. So Mike comes up and says, we start off with Denny on the drums, and Dennis plays, and here's rhythm guitar, and Brian on bass, and all that sort of thing. And the audience likes that, and the liner notes on the CD release note, this is a good way to tell, which band members the girls liked more than others, that kind of thing. So everybody gets introduced, and they play a little spiel, and they jump into Little Deuce Coupe, and they do a fine job. So it's interesting to think that song, which seems to be an integral part of the show now, would be gone relatively soon. The Little Deuce Coupe recording is from the December 1963 show, not from the August 1964 one. We follow up with one of the weirdos. We have Long Tall Texan. Giddy up. So Long Tall Texan, Steve Lewis helped me out with this one, originally done by the Four Flickers, and then somewhere along the line kept coming back, both as a B-side and a novelty record throughout the late 50s, early 60s, and the Beach Boys must have heard it and really liked it. Long Tall Texan is definitely played for laughs. Mike Love is very hammy, and he does his best cowboy voice and struts around the stage if you see the film of him doing it, that kind of thing. Today it's probably best remembered as one of the few live tracks to be on multiple greatest hits packages. It popped up on 1967's Best of the Beach Boys Volume 2, the only live track on there. Interestingly, not on the reissue. It's even on American Summer, the Capitol Club greatest hits package from the mid-70s. So it definitely has an association with the group, I guess as kind of a novelty live number. It too would return to the live set after being absent for the late 60s and 70s. It returned in the early 80s. It is done on here, where Mike Love introduces it as the only Beach Boys country song, which isn't exactly true. It's probably the one the audience would know the best, though. But, or an American audience would know the best anyway. But pretty interesting stuff, and I guess we have to mention it. In the 90s, did a nice version there with Doug Supinaw, and Mike Love gets to be hammy in that one too. Not quite as much, but interesting stuff. So a song that I guess they did it because the kids liked it, and it was a chance to be silly, and it kind of just carried over, that kind of thing. That was also recorded in December of 1963, as was our very first ballad, In My Room. So the audience does yell and scream some during In My Room, but they're not too bad. You might remember if you watched my 2024 concert video, when I saw the Beach Boys doing In My Room in New York, the audience was yelling, and one man was very drunk and whistling loudly and kind of undercut the beauty of the song. So it's nice to know that even though the kids are excited even for a slow song, they're respectful enough that Brian is able to do a pretty darn good job on it live. Again, that was also from December of 1963, and In My Room would be a live staple for quite a while for the group. Really, there weren't too many stretches of time when it was out of the live set, so good choice there. Moving ahead, I was working in the lab late one night. We have the Monster Mash. The Monster Mash seems to have been a really big live staple for the Beach Boys. I'm not really sure why. I guess because, like Long Tall Texan, it was just fun and silly, and the group could just kind of goof around doing it. Brian, of course, introduces it, and Mike does a kind of Boris Karloff impression. He doesn't commit nearly as much as Bobby Pickett does. Usually around Halloween, I've seen Beach Boys communities online that post a lot of still images of Mike Love doing his monster faces and poses, and some of the stills are extremely terrifying when the camera's zoomed in on his face and he's, you know, making a scary Mike Love face at you. But very interesting there. Of course, not as good as Bobby Pickett's. It is odd to think, too, that Monster Mash would be a live staple for quite a while. We can hear it in 1965. And going back to live in Japan, which is very early 1966, they're still doing it. I know that in later years both Brian Wilson and Mike Love have returned to the song, but really only for like Halloween shows or maybe something that's kind of themed more along those lines. Very odd choice, but they're, you know, the group's having fun. I guess the kids like it. I guess that's really what's important. I should add that the banter that opens the concert version is different than the banter on either of the shows on the Sacramento digital sets. They must have gotten that from somewhere else, that kind of thing. So it must be a different take of the song. And then we finish off side one with an instrumental. We don't generally see instrumentals in the Beach Boys live set, so it's interesting to finally see one here. Let's Go Trippin'! Mike Love does kind of a fun little song, or a fun little banter intro, I should say, of the audience helping him count down the song. And it sounds like they're really going. I mean, their guitars are just cooking the whole time. So, pretty impressive stuff, really. Let's Go Trippin', of course, the Beach Boys had covered on their Surfin' USA LP. Dick Dale did the original. So, this take is from the second show, or at least the banter is, and some of the surrounding stuff. It's like that, and it's a fun way to end the first side of the record, and a nice chance to see how good the Beach Boys were at instrumentals, and indeed, as a surf rock group, they were pretty darn good. So you flip it over, we have Papa Ooh Mau Mau by the Rivingtons. So Papa Ooh Mau Mau, another one that was probably picked because the kids liked it, and it was just kind of fun. The opening banter is completely unique to concert. They did not take anything from the Sacramento shows, as evidenced by the digital set, so this must be from a different take or something like that, or maybe they even did some of the banter in studio. So today when we think of Papa Ooh Mau Mau in the live set, we probably think of it being used as a coda to Barbara Ann. Usually during the end of Barbara Ann, someone will sing, "It's the funniest sound I ever heard," and kind of blend in with that song. That's because the Beach Boys would revisit Papa Ooh Mau Mau in 1965 for the Beach Boys Party album, where it was paired with lots of other kind of fun teen favorites. So, pretty cool. Not sure exactly what show it's from. There might be either a doctor take or a completely different one. And I should add too, they use Papa Ooh Mau Mau either near the beginning or the end of the Sacramento shows, but here on the LP it's in the middle of the set list for some reason. Coming up next we have vocal solo by Dennis Wilson. We have his cover of Dion's The Wanderer. Now Denny usually got at least one number all to himself, and The Wanderer was kind of like his original one, but that would soon be replaced by Do You Wanna Dance? And that would be replaced by a different song there. You can see the cover of the Beatles, You've Got to Hide Your Love Away. So Dennis going from kind of these upbeat jamming numbers down to this gentle ballad in the space of less than 2 years. Kind of surprising. And of course by the late 60s Dennis could do his own songs, like notably Little Bird was his big number in 1968. That kind of thing. Denny does a good job on The Wanderer. He actually came down from the microphone, and Brian took the drums and Al took the bass. And I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, but several of the photos in our little concert photo book actually depict Denny at the front of the stage or at the microphone. So that would explain why. So Denny on lead vocals, Brian on drums, Al on bass. There's the venue for you. We'll come back to this little photo book later in the video. In the digital sets, Denny either changes the lyrics or flubs them on both takes. When it comes to things like roam from town to town, sometimes he says town, sometimes he says place, once he even says spot, that kind of thing. Dennis either didn't remember or was just rolling with it. But here on the concert album, he does the song exactly the way Dion would have done it, with no lyrical changes or mistakes. So this has either been edited in studio, or maybe it's a take from something completely different. The banter is from the second show, directly taken from that. So, pretty surprising there. I like it as Denny's spotlight. I think he did a good job. The Wanderer, again, too, was never done by the Beach Boys anywhere besides the live set that I'm aware of. No studio takes, nothing. Alright, next up, go to Hawaii. Hawaii. So Hawaii is, I think, best remembered as a Beach Boys live staple. Even today, it remains a live staple in their catalog. So it's nice to see that all the way back in 1963, they were doing this song, and the audience is really getting into it. It would leave the live set in the probably later 60s, about 1966 or so. It would leave the set, and it would come back later, of course. But a very fun inclusion. Nice to see the group doing an original, since we have a lot of covers on here. Good to see an original there. The take is taken from the second show, and the audience is really into it. They like Hawaii, and so do I. Alright, next up we have Graduation Day, and this of course was later repurposed as the title to the 2016 digital set, and I have a whole video on this one talking about it. So Graduation Day is the second and final ballad of the concert album. Now in the actual concert performances, they did things like Surfer Girl, but those weren't used for the LP. So Graduation Day starts with Mike Love giving a little spiel. Okay, who in the audience just graduated from junior high? And people cheer, high school. And he jokes about going to night school and summer school and hair school, that kind of thing. But interestingly, there's a mistake in the banter, because Mike Love says, now we're going to do another song about school. But the last song was Hawaii, and no other song has mentioned school before this. That's because in their live set, as evidenced by this digital release, Graduation Day always followed Be True to Your School. So they sing, you know, about going to school, they sing about completing school, I guess. But even though they did not use Be True to Your School on this LP, weirdly enough, they kept that part of the banter for Graduation Day. The take used on concert is from the second Sacramento show. It would remain a live staple into the late 60s. Up through 1967, they were still doing it, possibly even into 1968. So that's pretty cool. And this live take would be used on the Spirit of America compilation in 1975. So another instance, of which there aren't many, but there are some, of a greatest hits package taking a live track and using it. So concert, when it does happen, is a likely place to find some of those. Graduation Day, of course, is made even more fun by Denny yelling out "Day" at the end and kind of playing the song for laughs. The Beach Boys did sing Graduation Day in studio, but they ultimately never used it, and it remained unreleased, I think, until about 1990 when it was on the Summer Days and Summer Nights Beach Boys Today CD pack. So very interesting there too. They really liked the song, but you know, the audience didn't get to hear the studio version for decades. Then we come to what I'm sure for some people is the low point of the album, even though it shouldn't be. Their #1 chart-topping single, "Round, Round, Get Around, I Get Around." And the problem with "I Get Around" is that it's very obviously not from a concert. And that's because you hear the banter first. The banter is from the second show. And then you, on the CD especially, you can hear a cut before the song starts. The consensus, again, in the past had been it was the actual live studio take. That, again, has been challenged, if not redacted. But it sounds to me a lot like the live in-studio rehearsal take, which you can hear on 2014's Keep an Eye on Summer, and I have a whole video on this digital set as well. But it's kind of interesting. It doesn't match with the vibes and the performances on the original Sacramento recordings at all. So this is definitely the most heavily doctored, edited, re-recorded, whatever you want to call it. I Get Around is really the one that sticks out because it doesn't sound like even a live track, really. And then, of course, they add the audience sounds in. So again, there could have been a technical glitch that they had to cover up for, something like that. As Steve Lewis pointed out, and I'll repeat here, just because they did studio sweetening does not mean it's a bad thing necessarily. But it does seem really inauthentic, especially if you listen to the album like on CD or whatnot. It's still noticeable on the record, not quite as much. And we come to our big conclusion, Johnny Be Good. Now, Johnny Be Good was actually mixed for a single. That was also released on this digital set. But as far as I know, there were no singles from the Beach Boys concert album, which is odd, I guess, for a chart-topping one. But granted, maybe they didn't feel that singles for a live album were really something they wanted to invest in. Hard to say. But Johnny Be Good was the big closer, and it would remain a live staple and a concert closer for quite some time. They were doing it well into the later 60s. Of course, Johnny Be Good's a classic by Marty McFly, Chuck Berry. And no doubt that, the kids would really enjoy it. And Mike Love's little intro. Now, before we all get kicked out of here, I'm going to leave you with one more. Johnny Be Good was also recorded in the December of 1963 concert. And I think it's a worthy choice as a finale. We have no studio takes of Johnny Be Good by the group. There is supposedly one that was done in the late 70s, early 80s, but I don't even know if it's been bootlegged. I've certainly never heard it. But pretty interesting stuff there. Maybe someday we'll get one from them, because we know how much the Beach Boys, as many artists, of course, admired Chuck Berry and tried to kind of copy him as much as they could. Alright, so when the concert album was released, if you got the original record, you got this cool insert, which I will show you now. I believe it was the first Beach Boys to have a gatefold. Got a group picture. Here's a little write-up and some photos for you. And the write-up, it's nothing long, it's nothing particularly in-depth there. Very excited about their new sock covers and, this groovy group, that kind of thing. Nothing spectacular. As there were so many covers on the LP, maybe because they weren't songs that you could get studio versions of, it makes sense they kind of push those, like, hey, you like this song? Wait to hear the Beach Boys do it, that kind of thing. I will show you the rest of the photos there. I got this record as a gift, actually, from one of my students. He found it at a flea market and bought it for me. It was a very nice gesture. You can see, again, the auditorium where the three, at least, main concerts were filmed. And then some photos there. Mike Love doing the Monster Mash, Denny at the mic, etc. Reissues, such as from the Capitol reissue series there, do not include this insert. So you might notice that the line that says, inside 4 pages of exciting onstage photos plus notes on the concert, that is absent from both LP and cassette copies of the reissue. So I have an LP copy of the reissue, but I have it framed, hanging up on my wall. I didn't want to take it out today, so I showed you the cassette tape. But keep in mind, if you see a copy of this that doesn't have those photos, that's because it's a reissue. So that's just like a fun little extra you could get. We always like to get goodies. And speaking of goodies, I think, here's the 1964 concert tour book. I don't have too many of their contemporaneous kind of tour book literature, so I really like this. That being said, the concert tour book, it's bizarre. It reminds me a lot of that 1980s Sun-Kissed album book and how bizarrely it's written and all kinds of things like that. I mean, the photos are worth it. They do a nice job with photo collages and things. We get a heavily sanitized and very oddly written kind of bio of the group, that kind of thing, full of all kinds of fun teen lingo, which is almost incoherent in many ways. I refuse to believe that teenagers in the 60s talked like that. Brian gets a write-up about how he's the leader of the group and he always has a song in his brain, that kind of thing. Interestingly, of course, Brian would start withdrawing from the public eye, focusing on studio work not long after. Mike Love, who gets some really bizarre statements, such as how he never has to mind his fingernails because they're often in his mouth. And I don't know. It also makes a big deal that Mike Love's a Pisces, so I guess they predicted Pisces brothers all the way back in 1964. My favorite page of the booklet, ads for their other records. If you want a groovy Sacco Beach Boys record collection, make sure to buy them all. Al gets right up. He's kind of the quiet, mature one of the group. I do like how it says he lives near Mike Love, but they never hang out unless it's for work. So, there you go. Carl, of course, his write is about how he's the youngest, and someday he wants to write music and produce music like his big brother Brian does, and indeed he would get to do that eventually. And Denny, of course, he's the bad boy of the group there. He lives fast, parties, and such a great mixer. The girls all love him at the hump. And of course, picture collage at the end. I really like that. And then join the Beach Boys fan club to show you care. You know, for just $2, you can get a membership card with photo on the back, an autographed picture of the Beach Boys, and a newsletter sent to your home every 3 months. The International Fan Club. There you go. $2 yearly dues. $1 bill for an autographed picture. No, that's $1 bill for a fan club card. Excuse me. Alright, so let's talk reissues. We mentioned, of course, the Capitol reissue. We've talked a lot about Capitol reissues on this channel. I will say the concert one is one of the few that is not edited. It's all 13 songs. It is complete. So we don't have any, there's no other live release with extra songs or anything like that, like there was with Be True to Your School. But yeah, concert one, reissue, I guess you're not getting the bonus pictures and things, but you are getting the complete album. Let's actually talk about a more unusual reissue. We've talked about Pickwick on this channel quite a bit. Here's the reissue from the early 70s on the Pickwick budget label. So if you wanted to build a collection, but you didn't have the opportunity to buy the older records, maybe you're a little bit strapped for cash, goes by the Pickwick one. Pickwick released a lot of different types of Beach Boys albums. They didn't do what Capitol would do later and just have, here's a release with a couple songs taken off. They sometimes made their own, sometimes abridged them, sometimes combined albums, you never know. This release, wow, great concert with my pick for the world's ugliest record cover. I don't understand why it looks like it's written in blood. I don't think the Surfin' Safari or 2020 photos on the cover do a whole lot to make me want to listen to this, but maybe that's just me. But this early 70s Pickwick release omits 4 songs. It omits Let's Go Trippin', The Wanderer, Hawaii, and Johnny Be Good. So 3 covers and 1 original. And weirdly, it takes Little Old Lady from Pasadena, which was the second song on the concert album, and moves it to the end, or near the end. Actually, it's a couple from the end. So that's kind of strange too. But who knows? They were probably just trying to sell old stock there. And then it was packaged with the Best of the Beach Boys Volume 3 reissue under the title High Water. Here's the 8-track for that release, and it jumbles the order of the Beach Boys concert songs up even more. Changes them around quite a bit, which for an 8-track is pretty common because you gotta make sure it's gonna fit on the tape. Alright, one more thing, that's to talk about concert outtakes that were made available before we had the live digital set. So there were a few. The notable one, when Concert and Live in London, I have a whole video on Live in London that you can check out if you want to, were paired up, and there was one outtake from Beach Boys Concert, and that was Don't Worry Baby, which the booklet claims it's the earliest known recording of it, or at least the earliest kind of complete public recording anyway. So that one, they used the second show. It's also unedited. The banter's kept. It doesn't sound like there's any extensive remixing or anything with the songs. You know, it's really an authentic live document, which you can't say for all of the concert LP. So for many years, that was the only outtake we had. Kind of stingy, you know, for you know, a whole 2 complete shows were available with lots of songs that weren't used. They just picked one. They made a good choice, admittedly. And Don't Worry Baby sounds pretty good. I kind of wish they'd kept it for the concert LP, but unusual there. The other bonus take, of course, was Heroes and Villains. We've talked a lot about Late in Hawaii and that whole debacle in other videos. Our other major outtakes came in the 90s. You might remember in 1993 we got the 30th anniversary box set, Good Vibrations, you know, 30 years of the Beach Boys. And there are 4 concert outtakes on there. Now, Made in California, the 50th anniversary set, had a whole section that was just live material, most of which was previously unreleased. And in the interim, you know, the 11 years or so since it's come out, we've had a few of those made available, but some are still exclusive to it. But the 30th anniversary set had next to no live material. It wasn't really a major focus. So we get our first Beach Boys concert outtake. It is at the end of disc 1. It's a live version of Hushai. There's a brief concert promo at the beginning, and then the first show take of Hushai, that kind of thing. It should also be noted that after Hushai, there's a bonus hidden track. That's Brian Wilson singing Happy Birthday 4 Freshmen. That would later be re-released in 2001 on the Hawthorne, California set. The kids love Hushai when the Beach Boys sing it, and you can absolutely hear them go crazy when Brian does, you know, pillows lying on your bed, and does his really high voice, and the girls just go nuts for that. So pretty cool stuff. But that was the only one on this first CD. This first CD covers up through about late 1964, so they put it in the correct place because 1965 kicks off the second disc. But yeah, that's the only one there, and then the rest of them are all at the very end of the release. So the last disc of the Good Vibrations set is kind of odds and ends and all different things. We have the weird kind of 2-channel ones where you can adjust your radio and hear only instruments or only vocals or anything in between. We have some backing tracks and some ads, things like that. But we have 3 different takes here. First up, Concert Intro / Surfin' USA, live 1964. That is using the first show intro, and also looks like the first show take of Surfin' USA, so that's good too. And the kids love that one. Even today, kids love Surfin' USA, so that's pretty fun. After that, we have Surfer Girl, 1964, which Mike Love talks about being the first Beach Boys ballad, their first slow song, and the kids like that one a lot too. Also from the first show. And finally, Be True to Your School, which should have gone before graduation day on this album. Also from the first show, has all of Mike Love's banter about Brian Wilson brags how much he can throw a football and all that kind of thing in it too. So you could tell the Beach Boys wanted to keep rapport with their teenage audiences. And yeah, there you go. So, Beach Boys concert. What do you think? You know, it's a fun album. Yeah, it's maybe not the most authentic kind of artifact from the time, but you can have a good time with it, and it's got a lot of unique song choices on there. Next week, we'll dive into Live in Sacramento, talk about what didn't make the cut for the concert album. So until then, my friends, comment below with your thoughts on Beach Boys live albums, and we'll see you next time for that.